one of the reasons I left the UK was because I actually suffered, I wouldn't say so much depression, because I did CBT, which is cognitive behaviour therapy, and I realised by going through that I had very bad anxiety, because I used to DJ and produce music as well. I did do that full time for a little bit before I went back to the school. This was I did that from about 2013 to about 2017. And I just had enough of the UK, I'd had enough of the music scene. I wasn't happy in my job, and I booked a one-way ticket to Australia via Asia.
What's up, lovely people? Welcome back to another episode right here on Entrepreneur Podcast Club, coming live and direct from Solihull in Birmingham. I'm your host, Mr. EPC. Give a big, massive round of applause to my very special guest, Shane. So welcome to the show first and foremost, and thank you very much for your time. So in 2022, you set yourself a target to attend 100 networking events in 2023. So how have you got on so far?
Well, firstly, thank you so much for allowing me on the podcast.
No
I really
problem.
appreciate it. So yes, set the goal of 100 networking events, and we're in August now, coming towards September.
Yeah.
And by the end of July, I had achieved 100 events. And as of now, I've done 110 events. And what I've got from it is a lot of things, a lot of business, a lot of things outside of business that we can go into more detail.
Yeah.
And I've been able to help others. But when I initially set the goal of doing it, it was almost like I wanted to do the goal, but I didn't know what to expect. But it's almost like a social experiment, or what can I get from networking if I put myself out there and meet as many people as possible. But not just meet them and then never talk to them again. There's much more to it, and I've learned more about the art of networking as well.
Okay, fantastic. So in terms of hitting that target, how did you come up with that idea or target?
Yeah, it's a good question. Because at the moment I guess it's for numerous amount of reasons, because I wanted to raise my profile, because I think it's like, so Sajid Hussain, who I know you've had on the podcast,
Yeah.
he says the more hands you shake, the more money you make. A very famous saying, in your network is your net worth. So I was actually, okay, this is true, let's put it to the test.
Yeah.
It's almost like, let's put this to the test, because these sayings are said all the time, but how many people that know these sayings actually go out and network? So I thought I'm going to do it for that reason of getting business, because I'm growing at the moment an architect practice, Co-Arch, and a CGI company called A to B 3D, and obviously my own networking event, the Developers Network here in Birmingham. So let's see if I can drive a business to them as well, but also make sure that we still do the work and still provide the quality networking events. So initially it was for the business side of things, but as time has gone on, other things have come out of it, and I've been able to help others as well, which I'm going to.
Okay, fantastic. So you mentioned there about your networking. How often is it? Once a month, the networking event?
Yeah, so my personal networking event, the Developers Network, is once a month, so it's normally the last Tuesday of the month, and it's property development focused as well, so new builds, commercial conversions. You won't get taught how to build a buy-to-let portfolio or a HMO portfolio. It's purely property development, so things like talking about how to get planning on developments, talks with architects, other developers doing talks on how they did their projects, the trials and the tribulations and things like that, the insight into the world of property development. And it's a really good educational and helpful community that we've built.
Okay. And in terms of some of the guests that have come onto the networking event, you've got quite a few guests. So how do you go about getting those guests onto your networking?
I reach out to them, to be honest. So originally when we set it up, we'd reached out to other networking events hosts that had the guests on previously, because it was like that warm introduction, just to get us some guests lined up. And then I was like, okay, so what we'll do is we'll get some guests on that are our sponsors. So the architect sponsor, which was us, Co-Arch. We get the planning consultant sponsor to do a talk. We have my co-host Steve. He does a talk as well on his project. So the barn conversion. There's a lot of educational pieces in there about what not to do during the development. And then I also reached out to what we would call, obviously, social influencers in the property space as well to do talks, but again, to make sure their property development's focused. So we've had Charlotte Edwards, who's the accidental female developer. We've had Savoys, who are doing like luxury commercial conversions in London, and then like a few others as well. I can't think off the top of my head, but because we've been running for nearly 2 years now, but yeah, we normally have one sort of big guest per quarter that will attract a bit of a crowd, you know, because that people want to see them live and see them do talks. John Howard was another one from Property Elevator, which is like the Dragon's Den for property.
Okay.
As well.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. So before you start going into networking and the property space, what were you doing before that?
Yeah, so I was IT technician out of school.
Okay.
Earning probably minimum wage at the time, because I went travelling for 3 years, and I returned from travelling in 2020 during COVID from New Zealand, and I wanted to get into property, and I wanted to get into property development specifically. I wasn't really interested in building a buy-to-let portfolio or doing HMOs. I was just really interested in property development, and I found that, well, if I can learn how to do property developments, and maybe I could do my first new build within a 4 to 5 year period, instead of maybe buying my first buy-to-let within 1 to 2 years of getting that capital and working with investors and building, let's say for instance, if I'm buying average of let's say 1 a year, sometimes that's how long it can take when you're starting out, then by year 5 I might have 2, 3 tops maybe that's just my limited mindset there. Or I could do a development of 10 units within 5 years if I get educated and then retain those on a build to rent. So I looked at it from that angle, because I know plenty of portfolio landlords that will have 20 buy to lets, let's say, and then they want to take the steps into developments. They still need to educate themselves in development. Doesn't mean you sort of got this triangle. You start out maybe on rent to rents, then buy to lets, HMOs, and you work your way up to developments. I kind of wanted to skip all that and go straight to the top, because it's a whole different strategy. It's like, well, if I can create this power team, but then give up a chunk of my equity, if I find the deals and I bring the people together and I can get my first one that way, then why can't I do that? So I think it's definitely possible. If you look at someone like Ainsley Laval, mind you, he did start out in HMOs. He went from HMOs straight to building 200 unit student accommodation. Yeah. So I believe it's definitely possible. You just got to have the right people and team around you to believe in that. But yeah, so working out of school, going straight into property development, but the school was never going to get me anywhere, because I was at the public sector, and you hit the ceiling at the school.
Okay, fantastic. So when you started doing some research into finding a mentor, have you got a mentor, and did you find a mentor? I
did. So I was like, the questions I asked myself was, how am I going to get into property development with little knowledge, definitely no money to be spending on getting into developments, or even education at that time, because I was saving for my first home, and no network either, and no experience, because working at school, didn't know anybody. So I started to go to a weekly Zoom, which was put on for free for the whole of lockdown COVID. They went on for 1 year consistently. White Box Wednesdays they were called, and they was on every week with a Zoom room full of anything to 50 to 100 developers and people that wanted to get in developments. And the host of that networking event said, once we're out of lockdown, we want to start putting on some networking events. So we're looking for networking events around the country. One of them's being Birmingham, it's a big city. So I was like, maybe this is my opportunity to, if I can host a networking event, I'll be able to meet loads of developers and get to speak to them and do deals and stuff. So that's kind of my mindset behind that. So I messaged the host privately and said, can I host this? And he was like, let's have a call. So instead of saying no, because I imagine some people would look at that and thinking, well, if I haven't done development, surely I can't host an event. So there is that imposter syndrome. So I messaged him and he said, let's have a chat. And ultimately he said, yes, you can do it, providing you co-host it with somebody that's already done developments. So I spent the next couple of months trying to find someone that would co-host it with me, and I asked a few people that I'd met on the Zooms that lived locally, and they were sort of toying with the idea. They weren't sure the yes, no, and they didn't really want to put in the effort all the time. And then one Friday night I got a call out the blue from my co-host now, and he was a developer, he's a developer, and he said, I'm also interested in hosting it, but I don't want to do the work. I was like, okay, well, I can offer my time. So I met him at his barn conversion, and we had a chat for about 3 hours, and he was just sort of grilling me in a way, saying like, are you serious about doing this? I think he just wanted to make sure I wasn't going to run off after 6 months if I got fed up a bit, which is fair. And then, because I'd educated myself throughout the months leading up to this on how to appraise deals, how to find deals, how to fund deals, sort of how to get planning, just from books, YouTube, anything I could, the Zooms, the weekly Zooms. And ultimately he said on that meeting, why don't you quit your job, come and work for me, and I'll teach you everything I know to do with developments. So effectively he paid me to mentor me.
Oh, wow, okay.
So in 24 hours I spoke to some trusted friends of mine that are in business, and they said it's a no-brainer. What are you waiting for? What have you got to lose? You'll find another job. It doesn't work out. So within 24 hours, put my notice in and went self-employed and worked for the developer self-employed. And that's how I got started in the world of developments from the school.
Okay, fantastic. So once you quit your job and you're working with your mentor, talk to us about the first couple of months. How were they, like, financially, mentally, stuff like that?
Yeah, it was very full on, like, to begin with, because there was a lot to learn quickly. So even because he has a portfolio of around 12 properties, so I was managing that as well. So I had to learn a lot about managing his properties, a lot of admin stuff. I was learning. I didn't even know what a gable was on the side of the house. Like, didn't know any of these terms, or architrave, around door. Didn't know any of this stuff. Literally learning this stuff, I felt so dumb. But it's like, you don't know what you don't know. I've never had to learn these words before. I've never really been in construction. So that was intense. Learning loads, putting in time, staying after work, like, because he would stay in the office till late. So I was just stay with him and just absorb, be in all the meetings, walk around, speak to the site manager loads. Financially, I took a pay cut to work with him, because I was self-employed. You don't get holidays and things like that, and if you don't work or you use sick days, you don't get paid. So it was definitely a financial hit, but longer term mindset here, because I'm like, well, this is what I have to accept to get into, enter into this world. And so I did. I took the financial cut. So I was living with my mum in her flat at the time as well. Okay. So I was still managing to save for the house, whilst paying like minimal rent. So full on, and definitely a financial hit. And there was some days where it was like mentally exhausting as well, because there were some things that I figured out about a year and a half, well, more so about a year after working with the developer, that I wasn't good at. That put me down a bit as well. So yeah, it was tough, but I learned loads and I enjoyed it as well, because part of the role was going out and viewing developments and houses all day, so which is what I enjoyed, and networking with estate agents and things like that.
Okay, fantastic.
In development world, there's a lot of planning constraints. It just depends where it is and what it is. So in property development, let's say for instance, okay, so there's loads of planning conditions. So with some new builds, they might take away permitted development rights, so you won't be able to build an extension on it. So that will be one of the planning conditions if they don't want to see that within the area. Councils have community infrastructure levy, which is something it's non-negotiable. You have to pay the council that. That will go towards schools, hospitals, playgrounds. Section 106 agreements, that is negotiable. That could be anything that will, again, fund community projects. That could go, so Section 106 agreement as well could be part of your development over a certain number of dwellings will have to be affordable housing, which can then make a development unviable. So in Birmingham, anything above 14 new build dwellings, whether that's apartments or attached or semi-detached, after 14 dwellings, affordable housing will kick in, which can be like 25 to 30% has to be affordable within the area, and that will depend on what the council want. So that might not be viable for some developments, that's why that's negotiable. Biodiversity net gain is coming in as well, which is something that we had an event last night at the Developers Network, which is something that's very new. It's I asked ChatGPT to explain like a 10-year-old, and it's in fact, instead of getting rid of sort of like the nature, let's say for instance, not just plants, not just habitats, it's adding to the development, so putting more greenery onto your developments, and if you can't directly onto your development, then it's like you've got to offset it somewhere else.
Okay.
So there's all these planning conditions above Article 4 that you've got to adhere to, that are non-negotiable within planning, and that's what can make some developments unviable sometimes.
Okay, fantastic. So you mentioned there about affordable housing, anything above 14, is that dwellings or?
Yeah, in Birmingham, so some councils down south I've heard can be as little as like above 4 or 5 dwellings.
Okay.
So it really depends. In the National Planning Policy Framework, which is essentially the rule book set out by the government to do with planning and housing, it's 10. That's like their guidelines, but each council then can take that and then adjust that to their own local policies and local plans.
Okay. So if, for example, someone's building a building with about 20 to 30 flats, would that be that affordable housing? Will that kick into that?
If it's in Birmingham, then yes. So just to give you an example, we was looking at a site for 77 units in the city centre of Birmingham.
Okay.
And there was an affordable housing rule, but what they insisted on was, I think it was two of the two beds had to be of a certain market value, and then 3 of the 1 beds had to be of a certain market value. It still made the development viable. Well, actually, it was the build cost that made it unviable, but in terms of the affordable housing element, didn't make it unviable. But then you get what makes an affordable house, because these are apartments, and these apartments are affordable. So a new build apartment in the city centre was selling for like anything between 200,000 to 400,000 on the side, and then an affordable apartment was seen as like 200 grand, which I don't think is that affordable for some people. Like,
I agree with that, yeah.
Yeah, so it's like what's deemed affordable. So because even you know, some people will struggle to get a mortgage, especially with the interest rates at what they are now. So yeah, that specific development of 77 units was subject to that, but only on 5 of the units. But it varies on development to development, and again, Section 106 can be. There is companies out there that will do a Section 106 viability study as well. Yes, so and they can be disengaged as well. So if it doesn't work, but the council need the housing, then like, okay, well, it can be a smaller fee, or they'll just get rid of it. So I've seen one Section 106 where it was required that the development next to a Morrison's had a drop-down curve. That was 11,000.
Oh, really?
And that was for 22 apartments.
Oh, wow. Okay.
It goes up.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it can be as little as that. It's what the council want and deem necessary.
Okay, fantastic. So you mentioned there a lot about property development.
Yeah.
So how do you go about appraising a deal?
Cool, yeah, great question. So firstly, you need to find out something called GDV, which is gross development value, and that is finding out what the properties are going to sell for once they've been built. So let's just use 10 houses at 200 grand each, so £2 million GDV. To find out the GDV, it's as simple as finding out what's a house going to be after a refurb. Go and speak to your local agents, look on what's sold on Rightmove, and then just gather that bit of data to go, right, I'm comfortable that these 10 houses, detached houses in this area, are going to sell for 200 grand each. Okay, so cool. So you've got 2 mil GDV. Now what you want to do is work out your profit. So what's the profit you want to make on it? Now lenders like to look between 20 to 25% for development finance. So you do your GDV times 0.2. That will give you a 20% profit. Let's just use 20%. So you've got your GDV, your profit that you want to make or you need to make it viable. Then you got your build cost. So to work out build cost, you want to, it's never going to be accurate, but look at a rough pound per square metre or pound per square foot value. So if it's got full planning for 10 houses, it's going to make your life easier. Let's just use this as an example. So you look at the plans they're drawing, and each house is, let's say, 100 square metres. So you do 100 times 10, which is 1,000. So 1,000 square metres is your total gross internal area of your houses. So then you do, let's say for instance, if it's, I don't know, £1,000 a square metre, which it wouldn't be in this day and age. So you do that times that will give you your square meterage times your build cost, £1,000 square metre, that will give you your build cost, and then you've got your GDV, your profit you want to make, your build cost, and then any other associated costs which I mentioned earlier, which is your CIL, Community Infrastructure Levy, which Community Infrastructure Levy, how that's worked out, each council will have their own calculators, and it's based on the new floor space it's being built. So in Solihull, I think it's in this area, it could be like £95 per square metre. So you'd have to work that into it as well. That's the CIL chargeable. That goes towards infrastructure for like community projects, schools, hospitals, things like that the council have. You might have a Section 106 agreement in Birmingham. If it's 10 properties, you wouldn't, because it's over 4. Only if it's over 14. And then you've got your obviously resale costs. So what the agent's charging. If you're keeping them, it's different. So let's just say an extra 50 grand for them. Let's say so. You've got your build cost. You've got your gross development value, your build cost, your profit, any other cost, agents, reselling fees, etc. And that's your land value then. So once you've worked out all these costs, that's how much it is that land's worth to you. Now I say that that's how much it's worth to you because another developer might be able to build cheaper, or they might want more of a profit or less of a profit. So that would be your offer that you can offer on that site, and I would stick with my guns on that one. Okay. So that's how to appraise a deal. There's a lot more that goes into it, a lot more costs, but just from an overview level, that's how to appraise a deal.
So you get your work out your GDV, then you take away all of those costs that you mentioned in order to get the value of the land that you would put down.
Correct.
An offer.
Yes.
Okay.
If it was land without planning, you just have to factor in your planning fees, which it could be anything, depend on the size of the scheme. Mm-hmm. So you just have to minus those fees, which could be anything, well, I'm just ballpark, it could be anything from 10 to 50. I've even seen planning fees on large schemes for £100,000. So you just have to take them away, and there's your land value as well.
Okay, fantastic. So in terms of the land that you tend to source or develop, are there predominantly land with planning permission on there?
Yeah, there's quite a lot of land with planning permission. In fact, I'm glad you mentioned this actually, because there's lots of land that's available off market and on market that has planning permission but isn't viable. So there's lots of architects out there and planning consultants that will work with their clients to get planning on something that isn't financially viable. Now what we do is at CoArch, we actually do feasibility studies. So we make sure that the actual project is feasible before we go down the route of money being spent and the design. Because if the client can't build it, what's the point? And they've already spent money on our fees, which I wouldn't personally be able to sleep at night.
Yeah.
So I think it's imperative that a scheme before money spent on it for planning, that it's going to be viable with planning and be able to get what you want on it. Like if something hasn't got planned on it, it's like, okay, can we get, what is it? Is the scheme going to work with 10 houses? Could it still work with 5 houses? If it's viable for both, then great. If it's only viable for one, then obviously the risk factor goes up for the 10 houses. But that's where you need to engage with your consultants early, architects, planning consultants, to make sure that is. And even some things as well, it's like some things can get planned, doesn't mean it should be built as well because of that reason. Just because something's got planning on it doesn't mean it's going to work.
Okay.
Which is, some unfortunate developers fall for that, and that's a lot of things you'll see that will have lapsed planning where it's got planning, hasn't been built because it just doesn't work.
Okay, fantastic. There was an article a few months ago that came up in the papers about a developer that built properties on a land. Those are sold to the people that own them, but then they were worth nothing because there are a few issues with the actual land. I'm not sure if you came across that.
No. So yeah, I didn't come across that actually.
So I think that was November, December 2022. I think I came across that article.
Was that with the lenders? Was it the lenders valued it and they said the houses weren't, or was it something to do with the structural, the way they were built? Or
I think it
they
is
couldn't get lending on them?
To do with the land, because they did manage to get a mortgage on it, but the house was worth nothing after. I think they built on some land that was, what's the word I'm looking for?
Is it contaminated?
Yeah, that's the one. It's
so
contaminated.
So that's another big thing as well, is the biggest cost, or one of the biggest costs that can again make a development unviable, is not get your site investigations done early in your land contamination reports. Because if that land's contaminated and you haven't factored in that cost, this is why it's good to get a 5 to 10% contingency on top of your build costs. That can happen. So obviously that developer unfortunately fell short of that if he didn't get his site contamination reports done. Because that can definitely make or break a deal. That 77 unit one I was mentioning did have its site ground survey done. And it required 16 metre deep piles, which is because it was made ground, which is just like essentially like bits of rubble or stuff. So it wasn't contaminated, but that boosted the cost up from, I think we looked at it at £2,200 a square metre to £2,600 a square metre. So it went from like 12 mil to 15.5 mil. Just after looking at that, after speaking to a principal contractor.
Okay.
So it's important that you get those surveys done early. The thing is, that's why developments are higher barrier to entry, because the amount of money you're spending up front, which is always the risk. But this is why it's important to get a team of trusted people around you and build good connections that can give as much free advice as possible without spending the money up front if you're just starting out in developments.
Okay, fantastic. So in terms of your first development, do you want to talk to us about that in terms of how that was, how you funded it, who that was with?
So yeah, I've not done a development on my own yet.
Okay.
I've been part of a development with the developer I used to work with, and that involved a profit share. So I was part of that in that sense. So I did a bit of project management on it. I spent all hours of the day, the night on it, and that was a barn conversion in Tamworth in Arden, and I worked closely with that developer, just getting involved in all aspects of it too. It was the guy that was mentoring me to be part of that, and part of that was to have some of the profit share as well. So the way that was funded was with 2 private investors, and it was with the developer's doctor and accountant. So it was fully purchased and developed with cash. So no development finance was needed, and it was split 3 ways between them, and then the developer's share was then passed on to obviously himself, myself, and other parties that were involved. So yeah, that's how that was structured. And so barn conversion in Solihull actually, and that was a GDV of 1.58 million for 2 semi-detached 4-bed barns.
Okay.
And the purchase price was 350,000. Profit was about 450. So that was a very good. I think it was like 30% ROI on that, which is unheard of. But he negotiated that. It's on the market for 500,000, and negotiated that during COVID.
Oh wow! Okay, fantastic. So where were you born and bred?
I was born and bred right here in Solihull, although I do say I'm from Birmingham.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And did you go to school here, college, uni, and all that?
Yes, so I went to school in Birmingham, primary school, secondary school. I didn't go to university because I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I felt like I didn't want to do something just for the sake of it and then be in debt afterwards. So I did an apprenticeship as in IT, got some Microsoft qualifications. I think it was like I did a 9 to 5 apprenticeship for like £2.50 an hour, which is absolutely mental. Getting out like £100 a week or whatever it was. So I did that, and then worked in IT from like 2011 till 2017 before I went travelling for a few years. And then actually worked in construction abroad as well as doing some travelling. And obviously got back, worked in IT again for a short period because the position was still open, because I knew them pretty well.
Yeah.
And then obviously 2021 went into the property world.
Okay, fantastic. So when you said you went travelling, what countries did you go to?
I started off in China, Beijing, and from there I did the Southeast Asia, usuals. They call it like the Golden Triangle.
Okay.
It's like Vietnam, Laos, Thailand, Cambodia. It's just all around there, and spent 4 months there and got to experience what the culture's like, what they live like, and it's I always used to find that it's very cliche to say people go out there to find themselves, but I think that one of the reasons I left the UK was because I actually suffered, I wouldn't say so much depression, because I did CBT, which is cognitive behaviour therapy, and I realised by going through that I had very bad anxiety, because I used to DJ and produce music as well. I did do that full time for a little bit before I went back to the school. This was I did that from about 2013 to about 2017. And I just had enough of the UK, I'd had enough of the music scene. I wasn't happy in my job, and I booked a one-way ticket to Australia via Asia, and split with my girlfriend, quit my job and just left the UK pretty much on short notice. And so sorry, diverged a bit there, but did Australia for a year and a half, worked there, travelled there, met some fantastic people, and like I said, sorry, it sounds cliche, you find yourself, but I genuinely think that going out there, because you put yourself out your comfort zone, and you're seeing so many different things and cultures that you're not used to here, and there's a different way of life, and you hear it all the time, like people in these third world countries like Cambodia and Vietnam, and in the sort of not so much in the cities, but even in the cities, like the poverty is insane, and you see kids, like 2-3-year-old kids at like 3 a.m. I'm out having a drink, and there's kids at that age collecting cans, and if they don't deliver enough cans to pay, the parents sit home, they get beaten, and that sort of stuff sticks with you, because it's like, God, I'm moaning at home about this and that and what I'm having for dinner, and these kids are struggling for scraps, and it's like, until you'll see the adverts and stuff, but until you actually go out there and you experience that, it won't change your mindset at all. So I definitely found like I became when I came home, my family even said I was unrecognisable. I was different. I'd lost lots of weight. I had a different mindset, a different positive outlook on life, and I just think travelling definitely helped me do that. So yeah, that travelling definitely changed me, and then sort of finished up in New Zealand, and then New Zealand was where when the outbreak happened, COVID.
Okay, it's good to hear that you come back with the positive mindset. And do you still suffer from anxiety and stuff like that?
I've learned to control it now. So if ever I get a short spell of it, I mean, to be honest, networking helps control that, believe it or not, because I'm always around people and I'm used to it, and I constantly pushing myself out of my comfort zone, like speaking in front of people at my own networking event. I don't mind standing up and talking. I quite enjoy it. Like 2017 Shane would look at now Shane and think that's impossible. There's no way you're standing up doing that. Even being on this podcast today, there's no way I'd do that. You know, even though I was DJing in front of crowds, I still felt anxiety.
Yeah.
But the way I control that now is just thinking back to when I had it and going, well, I've done this, this, and this, and I just quash it straight away. There's all sorts of methods you can do to get rid of anxiety. One of them that used to work for me was to write my thoughts down, scrumble it up in a piece of paper and throw it in the bin.
Okay.
That used to work.
Yeah.
Or burning the paper, but I didn't have a lighter because I don't smoke. But that definitely works. And then, as I mentioned, like, who am I to have anxiety when there's people across the other side of the world that their worries is where their next meal's coming from, and my worries is like, am I going to be a millionaire next year? It's nonsense. But yeah, it's all relative, isn't it? It's all relative. Yeah. So I rarely have it, but when I do, I just quickly adjust my mind to somewhere else, because I'm very outgoing and active. So that, I think, helps.
Yeah. Okay. Appreciate you taking the time out to speak to me, especially with suffering from anxiety as well. So appreciate that. Thank you.
Welcome.
So let's move on to your networking.
Yeah.
So what have you learned from networking?
I've learnt, for me, I've learnt that the law of reciprocity is a huge thing. Giving more than you take, giving to receive, like, I can't explain how much that comes back tenfold. So I go out my way to help others, whether that's, so I'll meet someone at a networking event, find out what they do, ask all about them, and then I'll go to another networking event, could be a week later, could be 2 weeks later, ask what they do, and I'll be like, oh, I met this chap or this lady at this event a few weeks back. They said they did this. I think you two would be able to do some business together. And I'll go out my way to email them both and connect them up together, because they will be able to help each other in business and propel them to the next level. And I've done that so many times now. And then because of that introduction, that warm introduction, then them two people have gone and introduced me to others that require an architect or require to learn about developments or require CGIs. So that's how that's helped in business, but by helping others, it actually helps you, by putting others first in that sense. So, and I discovered that about 30% through my 100 networking events, by actually helping others first and you know, giving. But the key is to not expect it back though. Don't go with the mindset of, I'm only doing this because I want something back, because it will come back anyway. But just don't be in the mindset of wanting it, because it will just come back naturally. So yeah, that's definitely been one of the highlights. I've been able to help people.
Okay, fantastic. So what is the importance of networking?
So that's a difficult question, and I like that you've asked it. I think if you want to get anywhere quicker in what you're doing, whether that is your own business or even within your career, I personally think it's detrimental to add networking as part of that, because it will definitely propel what you're doing. So I think because the more people you know and the more you tell people, the more they will tell people what it is you're trying to do. And if you're telling people your goals as well, you hold yourself accountable, but people that are doing the same thing as you are trying to help, they will also aid in your goal as well. So if you're trying to get more clients, hopefully they'll tell people what you do because you've told them what you do. That's why it's like putting yourself out on social media, telling people what you do. Because if you don't tell people what you do, how can you expect people to come your way? Like, yeah, you can do paid advertising and stuff, but that's cold because people don't know you, who you are. People buy from people. So a good example of that is the solicitors I used to purchase my first house. There's this lady that I know, and she used to work for this law firm, and I reached out to her, and she was like, I don't work for this law firm anymore. I was like, well, who do you work for? She went, I work for this other one. I was like, okay, well, doesn't matter who it is, I'm using you. Purely for that, not the law firm, I'm using her.
Yeah.
So where she goes, I go. And I think that's very much what people do. They work with people. Obviously, you'll get your brands. If you've built a solid brand like your Nikes and your Rolexes, people buy the brands, I don't buy from the people.
100%.
But to start out, people buy from the people.
Yeah.
Or people might buy from Gymshark because of Ben Francis. So because they like what he's done, they like that he's an entrepreneur, I'm going to support him in his cause because they like the ethos behind the Gymshark brand as well. Richard Branson, I like Richard Branson. I'll use Virgin Atlantic because I like him. I like his customer service focus. So there's a bit of that. So yeah, I think that answers your question.
Yeah. Fantastic. So what sort of books do you read in general and business wise?
Yeah, love that question. Well, the first book, which I think every man and his dog has read that's in business, and this is the one that definitely changed my life. Well, actually, I read this one first, and it was The Richest Man in Babylon.
Okay.
And that was a really good book. It's written in sort of like biblical writing, but the point is it's, don't spend more than you earn, like save 10% of your wage, that sort of stuff. But these rules still stand and work today. And then You're Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Yeah.
That's obviously granted that everyone's read that. But things like what's definitely helped me in networking. So if you're watching this, guys, How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. That is a phenomenal book for like, and it literally does. It's like, what is someone's favourite word?
That is. Put me on the spot there.
What's everyone's favourite word?
Hello.
It's their name.
Their name. Okay.
What happens when someone says your name? You look, you switch on immediately, isn't it? You attract to it. So that's something in that book. So if you use people's names, and remembering people's names is key as well. So that's something that I learned in that book, is to always use people's names and obviously try and remember people's names as well, because it's almost like it's a much warmer response then as well. So that's a good book. What's the one? Atomic Habits by James Clear. That's a really good book as well. So one thing I learned from that to make my life of going to the gym easier, I'll put my gym clothes out at the end of the bed, so in the morning they're there. It makes the idea of going to the gym easier than having to scramble around in the morning. So it's like, or if you wanted to stop bad habits like of going on your phone first thing in the morning, put your phone downstairs before bed. Have that habit. So that's a great book as well. Another good book that I read. It's gone out of my head, but one of the ideas that I read in it, or things that I sort of live by now, is 10% of life is what happens to you. 90% of life is how you react to that 10%. So how you react to something that's happened is going to impact that 10%. So in terms of you had an accidental bump in a car, if you react to that in a way where you're angry, or that's going to impact that person, there could be like a fight, there could be abuse, even if it was an accident. But if you are calm and collective and say, look, it's okay, no one's dead, we're all alive, think how the outcome could be different. Or think if you spill something on the floor and you get angry at your partner, they're going to have a rubbish day, the kids are crying, let's say, and you're going to have a rubbish day, but you go, it's only water, don't worry about it, let's have a good day. See how the tweet that can impact your whole day, the way you react to something. I can't remember the name of that book now, which is bloody
Sounds
annoying.
interesting.
It's a great book, and it's really short as well. I think it's the art. I think it's like the art of being amazing, or something like that.
Okay.
Something like that. But that was a fantastic book.
Yeah, so a lot of psychology behind that book as well.
Lots of small little nuggets and takeaways. Yeah.
Fantastic. So, what advice could you give to someone who's watching this and wants to go into business or property?
I would say going into anything in life, whether that's business or property, is be a nice person. I think sometimes I don't feel there's a need to be ruthless in business and in life. I think it might get people further quicker, but there's no longevity in it. So I think just be a nice person, be humble, be kind, and I think persistence beats resistance as well. And just be persistent and consistent in what you do, and you can't go wrong. And every entrepreneur that's made it was consistent and persistent in what they did. And as long as you follow those things and have like good habits. And actually, I want to say this, above everything else, and I mean everything else before money and everything, it's your health. Because if you don't have health, you're not there for your family, you're not there to make the money, and you're not gonna last, and there's no longevity in what you're doing. So I think you get eat well, live well, and all that sort of good stuff.
Yeah, some fantastic advice there. And that is it, ladies and gentlemen, for this podcast. I've been your host, Mr. EPC. Big shout out to Shane for taking the time out to speak to me, and I will put all the links in the description box below for Shane's social medias. And if you are around in Birmingham looking to get into property, do attend one of his networking events, and do look out for the next podcast. And thank you very much for watching.
Cool, thank you so much for having me.
No problem.